because it would be easy to find rebuttals to bad claims. You are now living in the utopia we envisioned, where it's easy for you to find rebuttals to bad claims and you never read bad claims anymore, right? Well, maybe not. So in this period of, in this group trying to build this vision, I had doubts. And this group around me was very libertarian. So I wasn't then, but the idea of betting markets was in the air there as a libertarian thing. And I thought, well, instead of backlinks being the solution to better debate and better conclusions, why not just have the betting market prices? That would also cut through the bullshit and give us more reliable answers we could all rely on. And so in 1988, roughly, I started thinking and writing about this. I did a bunch of talks at various Silicon Valley places like, Xerox at the time. I don't know if you remember Xerox. About this idea. I started to write about it. And I had sort of the initial vision that most everyone else has had since then. Maybe I had it first. I did try really hard to go look up everybody who had had a similar idea before. So I spent many hours in libraries just trying to scour anybody who had said a similar thing. And I tried to cite them all. And so my difference wasn't having this idea, which is an ancient idea. I was just going farther and saying where this could go. And that was 1988, 89, 90, where I gave all these talks and did these things. So since then, in 93, I went back to grad school to get my PhD, and I was intending to work on things like this, except there were some detours there. But I helped out the first play money prediction market, which was Foresight in 93, which was appearing with the beginning of the World Wide Web. I think it's still out there, actually. So I was involved in some prediction market projects then in the next decade or so, especially when I got my first job at George Mason, 99. I was involved in the policy analysis market, a DARPA project, involved in making technology for prediction markets, working on lab experiments to test some issues about things that could go wrong. And so over time, I thought more about the power of prediction markets and what they could do, and saw more failure modes with time. And I evolved an opinion about where I thought the gold was. What was the big payoff? And over time, more new people just coming into the industry. And what I noticed is the new people kept coming in with the same vision I started with. And I would try to say, well, yeah, but this is where the gold is. And over time, people would say, you want to be involved with this project, we're going to do it this way. And I said, well, that's kind of dumb. You don't want to do that way. You want to do this, or technology development projects, which we're fine developing technology, except we just had a huge technology overhang, and we still do. We still have lots of advanced technologies that Manifold isn't going to use for the next 20 years. So that just didn't seem so exciting to work on piling more unused technology on. And it didn't seem so exciting to work on projects that I thought were just misconceived. So I basically kept not joining projects. And that meant I sort of, from the views of most people in the prediction market world, drifted out of the world. I wasn't running projects, I wasn't giving out money, I wasn't managing things, I wasn't main platforms talking about things, invited keynote speakers. So this is emotionally important to me, but I'm trying to be fair. But the key thing I'm saying is this, I've always thought this was the best idea I've had in my life, the thing, my biggest contribution, but this whole world wouldn't listen to me about where I think the gold is, where I still think it is. So I'm about to tell you that, but I'm warning you that I have an unusual view and you should take that for what it is, right? But they've given me a platform here to try to tell you where I think the gold is, all right? Okay, so let's start with an analogy. The steam engine, a motor. It's a powerful technology and it's helped make the world rich. If you were the first person with a motor and you wanted to convince the people around you that this was a valuable technology, you could go just hook it up to random things and make them go thwap, thwap, thwap. Right? You could stick it in water and make it spizz and water would fly out. You could, make a curtain get all twisted and fall off the wall. You could do a lot of things to show, oh, this is a thing, and look its power. But you wouldn't really inspire a lot of investment or effort because you hadn't really shown it was useful. You just showed it was a thing, right? A famous example is the Aztec wheel. As you may know, they found Aztec toys with wheels on them, but they didn't actually use wheels to transport stuff around, and they plausibly have good reason. They mainly had water and steep hills, so wheels weren't so useful. But the metaphor is, you could get stuck with using something as a toy and not think about how it could actually be powerful. So now I need to make the distinction. What's the first vision people have when they think about prediction markets? When they first enter the field, would first get the idea, what I first had when I first entered the field, and then alternatively, where do I think the big value is? So I think the first thing people think about is that we have a world of talk, people talking all the time, as you know, blabbing, and my colleague Alex Tabarrok says, betting is a tax on bullshit. We like the idea, people would be bullshitting less if we could push them to bet more. And then this world of talk we have might be a little healthier. And people could even enjoy pushing other people to go, yeah, you want to bet? That's kind of fun and edgy. And it pushes the world in the right direction. And so you imagine basically supporting that by making a place where people can go, yeah, you want to bet? And if you go there, you offer the bet, and then other people feel a little embarrassed, or they join, et cetera. But now, rivals respect each other from the fight, and you've got a fun world of fighting. And so that's the vision that people typically gravitate to, is a idea that we could make a fun fighting game where people were betting on things that people are talking about, and then our talk would be healthier and we'd have more fun. And that's the vision that has come to people's minds over and over again in my now 35 years of history in this area. And that's a fine thing to do. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, okay? I just think there's a much bigger value somewhere else nearby to be achieved. And yes, maybe this is the thing you need to do first before you can do that, but I've seen this happen again and again for 35 years. People going for this smaller thing and then maybe achieving it to varying degrees, but what's the other thing? Okay, so I'm an economics professor, and a foundation of our field, including not just our field, but business and a lot of people nearby, is the concept of decision theory. Decision theory is our best and pretty good theory of how people do and should make decisions. And decision theory says that when you make decisions, you combine your values, your utilities, i.e. what your priorities are, with your beliefs, and your beliefs should be updated with information. We've got whole standard mathematical theories of how that goes, but the key thing is we can represent the idea of and calculate often the value of information, which is to inform decisions. That is, the reason in decision theory to know more is to make better decisions. And as an economist, we say the world is full of large organizations where a lot of resources and value is at stake, which make a lot of big decisions where they can make wrong decisions, they often do, and they have large values of information for those decisions. Large, as in millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars of value in a decision. That's the gold in the world out there. That is, if we could find a way to get people better information in their decisions, that's just a huge percentage of the value in the world out there to achieve. That's not just a small, cute startup. That's a big percentage of world product, right? And world product is what, like 30 trillion, 100 trillion? I guess about 100 trillion. So 1% is $1 trillion a year. That's what we're talking about as the value that could be achieved by making better decisions. So how can we achieve that value? So one of the key things is that you guys are all old enough to have been in many organizations where you can see that the decisions are not reflecting all the available information, right? And you know the reason is that the people who do know or could know things find it hard to communicate with the people making decisions, in particular hard to be trusted by them, and maybe they can get an email to them, but they can't get believed, right? So, and the bigger, the more dysfunctional the organization, the bigger value is sitting there in, could we aggregate information better? Could we take the things many people know or could know, combine it together in a way that would be directly relevant for a decision, and then make better decisions with higher information value? So it seems to me the world is dominated by a lot of large organizations that have a lot of dysfunction. Anybody over the age of 40 will just agree with me on this. I don't think it's pretty hard to find anybody who would disagree about that who's been around the world. Our world is full of big organizations that just make a lot of bad decisions because they find it hard to aggregate information from all the different people in order to make their decisions. So prediction markets are a proven method for doing exactly that, for having a decision, setting up a market right next to the decision, a question, and then asking a lot of people to contribute that. In particular, as a side point, I focused on this concept of decision markets exactly because it best supports this mode. That is, if you are thinking of some decision, then you make a market on sales or competitors' actions. It's often maybe a little hard to tell, well, if I knew that, how exactly would I make a different decision? But a decision market is where you estimate the consequence of a particular decision. So you say, if we open the plant in Memphis, or if we open it in Tallahassee, which will have more sales, which will have more profit, et cetera. You just ask directly, what are the consequences of my choice? And then that should give you just directly valuable information about your choice. So we know mechanically, in a sense, how to set up a market to inform decisions. And we expect there's many trillions of dollars of value on the table here because the world is basically driven by decisions, and a lot of decisions are just made not on full information. So this is the potential at stake here. And not only that, if you think about all the policy and charitable and causes you care about, AI risk or global warming or whatever it is, you probably believe that the main reason we're not doing better on that is we aren't aggregating information well enough to agree together about what the problems are and what to do about them. So a better mechanism here not only would make trillions of dollars in business, it would make the world much better, literally, for all the other problems you care about. That's because that's exactly what the potential is. And in some sense, those are the decisions we do the worst at aggregating information. These big policy decisions where politics and everything's all mixed up with it. All right, so huge potential value, but how do we achieve that value? And how does that relate to this other thing I talked about, the image of a world of talk, making a fun game where people are challenging each other and fighting each other to better be truth? The key distinction here, I would say, is like this analogy with the motors. So the way motors actually worked, and the way most industries should work, and do work really, is once you have a motor, you go look for the highest value application that you can use on that motor. Initially, it was, for steam engines, pumping water out of mines, right? So your first application is going to have to be sensitive to the features of your initial version, how easy they are to move, to repair, what sort of fuels they need, what size, et cetera. So they made motors for pumping out waters out of mines. And that was a big enough, important enough application that they could sell a lot of copies of motors and then build up a scale where then they could then try out motors on something else, like trains, boats, things like that, right? So the lesson here is, if you just say, gee, a motor's a cool thing, let's put a motor on the palace door. The king's got to see that. And then the king will think, oh, cool, and then the world will want to do this thing, right? But the market for motors on palace doors is really tiny. But that is what often happens in these areas. People look for the most flashy application, Like people say, hey, prediction markets, let's apply them to, I don't know, predicting AI risk or something. Okay, cool, but like that's a really tiny market. You want to go for the really big markets. That's what you always want, right? When you're making wheels and trying to sell them, you don't want wheels on toys. Well, maybe that's a decent market, but you don't want wheels on, doors or something. You want wheels on carts, if there's a lot of carts. The first computers, they were general computers, but they weren't useful until you had software that did high-value applications. Accounting, for example, where there's just a huge amount of value, lots of customers, you can do it with the first version of the product. Okay, so this vision says, to untap this enormous value, we have to go application by application, starting with some stereotyped, thing of value where there's a lot of versions of it in the world. And when you add up those versions, there's a lot of value. And it's not that hard to do because your first versions aren't so good, right? So for that, we look at the world, we say, people are making decisions out there. Where are the highest value decisions that an organization often does badly because, the people making the decision don't know things other people know, and where this just happens over and over again, all over the place, and it's high enough value and you can just do it simply enough that you could go for that market. That's what you want to do, is find the first thing like that, and then not just like throw up a general platform and say, hey, figure it out yourself. You would be, just like with the pumps or whatever, you would be designing a particular version of the product for that application, and then trying it out in that context enough to get a track record of success so that you could then go to further customers and say, look, we've already done these many customers like you this way. Here's our price and service for you, and we'll hold your hand. And then, then you have a product, right? So like, you don't just hand somebody a motor and say, this motor could be used to pump water. You have motors pumping waters a lot of times, and you know how you need to structure that motor to make that work. What happens if it gets flooded, or how to repair it, or how to haul it down there, etc. You work out the details of that application so that you convince the next customer that you can just come in and do it for them. This isn't them experimenting. This is a thing that's already worked out that you're just buying. That's how most people want to buy products. They want to buy a thing that's already worked out. And they just buy it, and somebody else did the experimenting, right? Obviously, somebody's going to be willing to be the first experimenter, but they're going to take you're going to give them a big price cut to be in that role, right? So in prediction markets, if I ask what are the biggest high initial value things, the thing that most often comes to my mind is new hires. Almost any organization with 20 people hires 2 to 4 new people every year, okay? If not more, right? And for every new hire you consider, you might have different rounds, but in the last round, you might consider, say, 3 times as many people as you have slots, 4 times as many people as slots, right? So you could do a prediction market in that last round of, for each of the people you're considering this last round, if we hire them, what will we think of that choice in a year or two? That's the usual metric for hiring people, right? And most organizations have the practice of having some sort of employee evaluation where you rate people after yearly. So that fits straightforwardly into standard practice. Now, many people say that the employee evaluations they do aren't actually serious, and they don't actually do it accurately, and they're just trying to motivate people with it. You'd have to do better than that, but that's high value. And you would, of course, invite the people who interviewed these people, other people in the organization who saw their resume, et cetera, to review them and to bet on who would be a good hire. So that's an example of what I'm thinking of, that if you're going to make a business like this, you're going to want to make a system designed around that application. And then you go to a firm, you say, we've already done this 10 times with other people. Here's how it goes. At this date, you give us the list of people, then you need the people you're going to invite to participate, and then this is how it's going to look, and then here's the materials that everybody's going to have. And you're going to have done it enough times to recommend things. So all innovation is a combination of a few elegant ideas and a lot of messy details, right? And the whole point of doing those initial versions of something is work out those messy details, which I don't know yet. And so my whole point of recommendation is, if you want to go for this gold, you need to be willing to take the time to work out those details about each particular application, i.e., who's allowed to trade in this market, who's allowed to see what, when are the decisions made, are they reversed, what the time scale of, et cetera is. That's how you would do this one or any of them. And that's what we haven't seen so far so much of. That is, in the model of you just have a place where people can go challenge each other to bets, you haven't gone through that work for some particular application. And so you could say, hey, you got a new hire, why don't you come onto my platform and make some markets? And they all, how exactly do I do that? And you go, we don't know, you figure it out. And that's not terribly inspiring for someone to come and want, to get that product. Sure, you've offered a cheap price because you're making them do most of the work, right? Other examples, deadlines, famously. Almost all organizations have projects with deadlines, and they do kind of want to know if they're going to make the deadlines. There are many issues with respect to exactly how to define the deadline and what variations to consider. I mean, it's not just will you make the deadline, but what changes could change the chance I'll make the deadline. What personnel changes, priority changes, definition changes, feature requirement changes, et cetera, budget changes, how would they affect will I make the deadline? Years ago, we had many experiments. This was a very popular initial application because it's very simple. And we certainly had the problems where people don't really want to know if they're going to make the deadline. And that's the sort of thing you need to work out. But again, that's exactly the sort of messy details that you need to work through by actually doing a set of real applications and trying out different variations until you find the way to do it that works better. So I mean, in some sense, this is the answer to the why is this hard in business question. Well, it's going to be hard in business if you just come in and do it the most straightforward way in a blunt, direct way, because business doesn't like blunt and direct about sensitive, important things, right? You got to finesse it. This needs to be finessed. That doesn't mean it's not possible. It means you got to experiment with how to finesse it. You have to try different things to see how to finesse it. And so, I mean, relatedly, as you probably know, a lot of prediction market activity in the last 10 years has been based in blockchain. And even compared to other software companies, blockchain companies are even worse about, we don't face customers, we don't talk to customers, we build tools and platforms and let somebody else figure it out on top, right? And they'd be even worse about that. I used to work with Consensus Point a long time ago, and they started out with this generic prediction market platform for companies, but they switched to their focus application was focus groups. And at the time, the other main successful application was replacing which new sort of research projects to try. So let's just walk through these in a little detail. So there's a lesson to be learned from them. The focus group application was, instead of coming in a focus group and like chatting and then voting on something, you bet about which products you think will win in the betting market, and then you find that more engaging and fun. But you basically tell us the same thing: which versions do you like? In those betting markets, they didn't actually settle the final price on any real outcome. They just settled it on the final price because it was just a fun, engaging thing to basically ask a poll question. And the other main application was basically when an organization had some budget to say, let's try some new things, and people would suggest new things, they would need to weigh, well, which new things do we pick? And they found, let's have a betting market on which new projects to try, where they settled the bets on the final price. Again, not connecting it to truth. And notice in both of these cases, they're not really using the function of prediction markets to give you an incentive to be truthful. They're using the function of prediction markets as a fun little game that we can all get behind and enjoy, which is a value, but it's kind of sad not to use that. And the other thing to notice about these things is they stay away from things where managers have opinions about the topic. So as we, for deadlines often, the problem is somebody's running a project with a deadline, you introduce a market on a deadline, and then it says you're not going to make your deadline, and this manager's pissed because he didn't like this message. And he can't kill the market until after it's over, but then it's no more and it won't happen again. So just generically, like I remember I got to talk with the ex-CEO of Google for 15 minutes once, Schmidt, and I was able to show him how conditional prediction markets worked, and he realized, hey, he didn't understand that was cool, but he had a speech about prediction markets, all prepared, so it's clearly a thing he had thought about. And he said, well, see, at Google, we don't want prediction markets because we're all about the visionaries, and we need each project to have a visionary who runs it. And if some market says no, that's like a naysayer and a kind of a downer, and we don't need downers about our visionaries, because our visionaries just need to be inspired and go with their vision. That was Schmidt's story. And basically, Google had these markets internally where they had play money markets about lots of Google events, and it was run by somebody who used their 20% to set it up, and it was successful for a while, and somebody got some academic publications about it. But talking to Schmidt and other executives, they said, we never intended to care internally about those markets. That was just for an external product we hoped you might get. We don't need to know anything these markets might tell us. It's other people who might want to know stuff. So this shows you the obstacles there, but again, remember the gold. Like, most of the world value is out there is because we grow and make better decisions over time. We make a lot of bad decisions because we don't aggregate information from as many people as we could. There's really trillions of dollars sitting in that possibility of doing that better. And it's waiting on people to do the first things so that somebody else can just not be an experimenter, but just take an early product. That's what this whole industry is waiting on. And it has been for 35 years. And unfortunately, at this rate, it may be another 50 years before we get there. There's no obvious thing that's going to force people to do this because, it is fun to just bet and fight and, play a game. And it does make the world better. I absolutely agree that people betting for fun, for fight, makes the world better, and it can pave the way for these other things. But in essence, these other things won't happen unless people have ventures where they specifically try to do them, right? You set up a project where you say, we're going to be trying to help people do new hires. We're going to get 5 different companies to be our trial bases. We're going to go in there and set up markets there, try them 5 different ways or 20 different ways, see which ones work better, find out what the problems are, get a track record, and then we've got a product that we can sell to other people for a lot of money. That is because huge amount of value is on the table for making better new hires in most organizations. And that's just one of many, many decision market applications that are out there, potentially here. And that's my vision of where the gold lies in prediction markets, in betting markets. There's gold and then there are hills. It's just the hills after the ones you're on. But they're not that far away. And there's a lot more gold there than the gold nuggets you've been finding on this hill. I mean, it's good that you went to this hill and got these nuggets. That's great, I agree. But at some point, I want to inspire greed. The hill over there, the next one over, it's got, you can even see them from here. Take out your scope. Big, shiny gold nuggets, glinting in the sunlight. You just have to go through that valley up to the other side and take the gold. That's my talk.